Today's going to be a little bit different of an episode. We are going to talk about my top 4 tips for effective communication so that you can achieve your bodybuilding goals and get the social support you need from spouse, significant other, mother, father, friend, whoever's important to you. And you will be able to do this in a much lower stress environment because you will have effectively communicated your needs. Let's get to the episode. Presumably, you value your relationships outside of bodybuilding. If you do not, skip this episode, please. This is not the episode for you. For those of you who do value your relationships outside of bodybuilding, I think communication is one of the things that can get us sort of hung up the most, because I think we assume that other people will understand those goals automatically, when in fact we need to do a lot more sort of legwork in terms of communicating our goals, what values these represent, how we communicate them, whether that be assertively or otherwise. We'll get into that. Point number 1, assertive communication. And we're going to want to distinguish this from the other 3 types of communication that we kind of, we want to avoid and get those out of the way. Those being passive-aggressive, and just right on aggressive communication. Let's take a look at each one of those to make sure that we stay away from all of them. Passive communication. This, I think we've all sort of seen it. It's that person who just kind of puts everybody else's needs before their own, and they have no care for themselves. And eventually, this person will build up resentment and eventually sit in their car alone and contemplate, I don't know, really awful things because they have put everybody else's needs before their own. So with passive communication, in the interaction, you're basically just acquiescing to everything that the other person wants. You might say what you want, but if your partner, wife, spouse disagrees or says, no, I'd rather have it this way, you kind of just cave. You do that enough, and that sort of passive kind of communication is going to net you a lot of resentment, and you're not really going to be able to hit your goals. Passive-aggressive communication, my favorite, or it had been my favorite in the past, is, okay, so like, let's say you get into a discussion about going to the gym. It's your general gym time, but you maybe forgot about something, and so now you're gonna have to negotiate a little bit. And let's say you just like, all right, you don't think about compromising or anything else that we're gonna talk about later, and you just you give in and you say, all right, I'm not gonna go to the gym. And then you begin expressing your displeasure through like sarcasm or emotionally withdrawing. So with passive communication, it's just sort of complete sort of acquiescence. And with passive-aggressive communication, you are giving them what they want, but you're kind of being an asshole about it. Not completely an asshole about it, but kind of an asshole about it. And you're also sort of withdrawing yourself emotionally, which is something that is only going to be a detriment to your relationship. So you don't want to be passive. You don't want to be passive-aggressive. Additionally, you don't want to be aggressive either. Now, with aggressive communication, you're going to find that this person takes over the conversation. They're going to be very domineering. They're not going to let their partner, spouse get any word in edgewise. They are going to get their needs met no matter the perspective of the other person. They're always going to hit their gym time. They're always going to hit their macros and food goals. Always, 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 always. To me, that's just rigid. And additionally, aggressive. I mean, they're going to be very forward about it, and even mean-spirited. And we don't want to do that. If you're watching this video, presumably you don't want to do that. So we have the passive-aggressive, passive-aggressive, and we want to avoid all of those. They all have their various flaws. So what can we do instead? Assertive communication being the gold standard, and there are a couple things you want to remember with assertive communication. Assertive communication allows you to express your wants, needs, and feelings without trampling or stepping on the other person's wants, needs, or feelings. Assertive communication is very useful because it leads to open, respectful, and productive dialogue, and it helps you set clear boundaries, find compromises, and even enhance your relationship, because let's face it, bodybuilding is kind of stressful. So in these stressful times, when your spouse, friend, whoever finds that you are stressed and you can communicate in this way, that is going to get you some, I don't know, brownie points, bonus points. I don't know. You know, we got points. We got so many points when we were in school. I don't get points anymore, but you're going to get so many bonus points with the person that you're trying to communicate these things with, because you're in a stressful situation and they see that you're trying. Being assertive respects you, it respects them, and it is a clear form of communication. It is also not deceptive. And so this is the most productive way to continually communicate in anything, really. So what does this look like? Let's go with the asshole perspective first. Hey, do you want to eat out? Stop asking me to eat out. You know I don't eat that shit. Not the greatest. Pretty aggressive, kind of forward, very harsh, no sort of back and forth there at all, just very curt to the point. Pretty aggressive communication. What's something more productive? What would that look like? Hey, do you want to go out and eat? Look, I understand you like to spend time together, but I am like 8 weeks out from my show, and it's just really hard for me right now when you ask me at the end of the day to try and fit in any more calories. Is there any way that we could plan this for maybe a couple weeks from now when I'm on my deload? Would that be possible? As you can see there, slight difference, taking into account the other person's wants and sort of desires, offering a compromise for something in the future that also fits with goals. And so you can see the difference there between that overly aggressive and just the sort of, assertive and yet compromising position that the second person took. Additional sort of bonus tip, a lot of this communication or effective communication is going to come down to active listening. What does that mean? Something that I've learned in therapy is that if you can summarize, reflect, repeat back, essentially, paraphrase what another person has said, they know that you understand or at least have listened to what they were saying, and they will feel heard. Now, in therapy, this is an extremely powerful thing, and I have spent sessions upon sessions outside of other techniques and skills and built the most rapport and goodwill with somebody that I'm working with just by sheerly noticing when they're feeling a certain way. Oh, you seem upset, you seem anxious, you look pretty sad. Or just being able to summarize the last 15 minutes into something that is both concise and very accurate. Being able to reflect back, paraphrase, summarize, show that you are actively listening will buy you so much goodwill that a lot of this will be tons easier. Think about that. Be an active listener. For this example, being an active listener means, can you paraphrase, reflect, summarize what the other person said back to them? Additionally, the use of I statements. I statements get us that you respect the other person's position and their feelings, wants, and desires. So saying things like, I feel X, Y, and Z leaves room for their feelings as well. It's not definitive. It shows that it is, the things that you're saying are your subjective feelings about a particular matter, and they are not statements of fact or statements of rigidity in a way. I statements are not statements of absolute fact. Even though it may feel that way, you're leaving room for the other person's feelings. I know that saying, I feel X, Y, and Z can feel like a really heavy lift at times. However, if you want to get your needs met, kind of like building a big ass chest and back, you're gonna need to do some heavy lifting. Active listening, I statements, assertive communication, all of these things come together to make you a more effective communicator and honestly a better partner. Think about what you want. It's going to take maybe not as much work as in the gym, but it's going to take some mental reps. Last thing on I statements and active listening, you're going to want to practice this in the off season. The first time you encounter a stressful situation probably shouldn't be when you're 6 weeks out from a show or, really deep into a calorie deficit of any kind. You're going to want to practice these things whenever you're full up, you're bulking, and compromise is easy because we fall back to the level of our systems and training. So just remember that nice little caveat there. Jesus, I'm only at point number 2. Point number 2, boundary setting. So boundary setting should really come up front. So sort of laying the groundwork for what is going to happen in the next weeks to months whenever you are beginning your bodybuilding prep. By setting boundaries, you are allowing the other person to know sort of the edges of what is okay with you, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, and still leaving some room in there for compromise. So what would boundary setting look like? Starting with knowing what your needs are and expressing them assertively, not assholishly, and communicate that to your partner. You will be communicating what you will do, what you won't do, the underlying values this represents to you, and what you can compromise on. For the underlying values, the reason these are important, if someone sees you engaging in a bodybuilding show, if this is a new relationship or something like that, they may have been attracted to you, or your friends may know you and like you for very particular reasons, but they still may not know why you value doing this. They may think, oh, you like to lift weights and you want to go on stage. It may represent more than that to you, and it is important for other people to know what those values are. So for me personally, I like natural bodybuilding because it's challenging. It's a form of personal growth. It's a form of long-term self-care. It's a form of continuing education, constantly having to keep up with training and nutrition, and it's a way for my sons to see me do hard shit. I value bodybuilding for a multitude of reasons, but those are just a few. And by relaying that information to our significant other, friend, whoever, that lets them in on sort of the deeper underpinnings of why we're doing it, which can be more convincing, persuasive. In reality, it's more honest. A note on boundary setting: be flexible with your boundaries if a clear compromise can be found. Additionally, be ready to maintain your boundaries whenever they are challenged with assertive communication, not that assholish type. So with boundary challenges, maybe have sort of a canned response whenever the challenge comes up. If it's a frequent challenge for your time or for your eating or for anything like that, it could look something like this. So you're going to want to state their need, repeat your boundary, repeat when your goal is going to be over, reiterate why it's important to you. This could look like, I know you like to spend time together baking, and I'm still at the point right now where I would murder a street vendor if I smelled funnel cake. I'll be done with my show in 4 weeks. And it's important to me that I finish strong and not murder food vendors because I smell delicious funnel cake. So it could look something like that. Biggest categories for boundary setting that I've encountered, just in my experience, so the big 3 really: time together, time apart, and food. Obviously, time together. Everybody, if you are in a close relationship with anybody, they want time together. Additionally, time apart. How much time are you spending apart? That can be a source of disagreement. How much more time are you spending at the gym? And then lastly, food. Obviously, that does connote sort of a time together, but it's sort of another special category too. So really start planning boundaries around time together, time apart, and food whenever you are endeavoring on a bodybuilding show. Compromise. What's compromise? It's exactly what you all know it to be. Everybody generally gets a little of what they want. It's not entirely satisfying to everybody. There's rarely a perfect compromise, but the idea is they get a little, you get a little, and everybody gets a bit happier because they are with someone who is willing to bend and not break in the face of a little adversity. If you want to be an effective compromiser, knowing the areas for boundaries that we previously talked about is going to be very effective in these situations. So if you want to suggest the compromise first, I highly recommend being the first one to suggest an alternative. For example, in terms of food, here are some alternatives that you can have at the ready whenever someone is wanting you to compromise. Like, let's say they want you to go out to dinner. Here are your compromises. Hey, can we cook together instead of going out to eat? What about a picnic instead of going out? How about we have a movie night and we fix all of our favorite snacks? So those 3 things allow you to have a bit more control, maybe even eat some of the same foods that you would have eaten anyways, but it still gets across that you want to spend time with them, and it does show that you're willing to bend or move a little bit. Lastly, 2 tips for overcoming objections in terms of effectively communicating your wants and needs. I would say the 2 tips are communicating your why and replacing the word but with and. Remember, as I said previously, if you let someone in on your why, they are much less likely to give you flack about it. If someone knows that you or what you value about your bodybuilding competition, they are much more likely to respect your boundaries and not challenge them as much. So know your why, be able to tell someone your why. Tip number 2, replacing the word but with and is the way that keeps communication rolling. So in improv, everything's always yes and the reason for that is communication continues after that. If you say yeah but, you're ending or cutting off communication. Hey, do you want to go to the movies? I understand you want to go to the movies, but I don't want to do that. It essentially just cuts off all communication. If you can say whatever their point was, and it generally leaves things just a bit more open and friendly. Remember, whenever you're communicating, try and replace the word but with and. Improv, psychology, it's helped me out. Hopefully it'll help you out. Some psychological implications for this. If you get this right, you will have the most support you've ever had in terms of any goals, really. Better communication, stronger relationships, and a better chance of hitting your goals without burning all your bridges. So, definitely beneficial. I hope that helped. Next thing you're going to want to do is watch this video over here on the best bodybuilding books for beginners. They're a treat. I love them, have them. Hopefully you'll like them, and I'll catch you next time.